People say marriage is built on honesty, but no one ever tells you how much silence can protect you. They don't mention the quiet calculations, the internal red flags, the instincts sharpened by stories you've watched unfold in other women's lives. When I married Julian Ross, I didn't share everything. Not because I was trying to deceive him, but because I had learned that love and money don't always mix well. I'd seen what happened when they did. My older sister, Clara, lost everything, her savings, her car, her condo, even her sense of self to a man who smiled like a saint and robbed her like a thief. I watched her rebuild from ground zero, and I promised myself I would never be so blind. So when I met Julian at a housewarming party in Portland, Oregon, I smiled, listened, asked questions, but I didn't tell him about the 4 properties my mother left me when she passed, or the quiet stream of income I'd carefully reinvested over the years, or the inheritance folded neatly under my name in an untouched trust fund. Not because I was playing games, because I needed to know who he was without the influence of what I had. At that party, I wasn't even supposed to be there. My best friend Nova had practically dragged me out of the house, insisting that I needed to see people who weren't fictional characters in a book. I remember standing by the kitchen sink, wine in hand, already calculating my exit strategy when he walked in wearing a soft denim shirt and confidence like a second skin. Julian Ross didn't look like the type who had to try. He didn't try too hard to impress, didn't dominate the room, but there was something quietly magnetic about him. He saw me before I saw him, or maybe I just noticed that he noticed me. Either way, 5 minutes later, we were laughing about the terrible playlist the host had chosen, and by the end of the night, he had my number, and I had his curiosity stitched somewhere inside my thoughts. Our first few dates were almost offensively easy. Coffee at a cafe tucked in a bookstore, dinner under string lights in someone's backyard, long walks with no real destination. He asked real questions, the kind that make you pause, not the shallow ones that feel like interview checklists. And when I answered, he actually listened. He remembered what I liked, what I didn't, how I took my coffee, and how much I hated when people interrupted. For the first time in years, I found myself relaxing, letting my guard down, not all the way, just enough to breathe. He made it feel safe. And I wanted to believe it was, but I didn't tell him about the houses or the money. I didn't lie. I just didn't mention them. 6 months in, we moved in together. A quiet loft near downtown. A year later, he proposed during dinner. No cameras, no staged surprise, just him, a velvet box, and a voice that sounded a little more nervous than usual. I said yes. And somewhere between his I love yous and my mother's old ring now sitting on my finger, I still kept my silence. Julian's family welcomed me quickly. Too quickly. His sister hugged me like we were long-lost twins. His mother emailed me holiday recipes and passive-aggressive life advice, and his friends called me the one who saved him from dating disasters. Everyone seemed to love him. It was infectious. And for a time, I let myself love him too, really love him. But even in love, I watched, and I remembered. Wedding planning is when I first noticed it. Small things, awkward hesitations about deposits, minor irritation when we talked about splitting costs. "I'll take care of it," he'd say, waving it off, but somehow, taking care of it always meant asking me to float something for now. "My card's acting up. This paycheck got delayed. I'll Venmo you tonight." He always had a reason, always wrapped in charm, always said with a smile, At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Then I started paying closer attention. One night, over dinner with friends, someone joked that the only way to own property these days was to marry someone rich. Everyone laughed. So did I. But when I looked at Julian, his laugh didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked at me like I was the punchline he'd been hoping for. And I knew. I knew in the way only women trained by heartbreak do. I knew he thought I had money, and he thought marrying me meant access. But what he didn't know was that I never left the vault open. Not even a crack. The wedding came and went, small and elegant, just like I wanted. We moved to Charlotte, North Carolina right after. A fresh start, he called it. A chance to build something new. I nodded, smiled. But inside, I watched the same cracks widen. Conversations about money became landmines. I'd ask how much something cost, and he'd dodge the answer. Bills showed up late, receipts went missing. He'd get tense when I suggested shared budgeting apps. "Don't you trust me?" he asked once, and I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because trust is earned, and he never realized I'd been silently scoring every move. Then came the envelope. I was sorting through the mail on a rainy Tuesday, bills, flyers, a birthday card from my aunt when I saw it. An off-white envelope addressed to Julian. The return label read, National Debt Recovery Agency. My stomach dipped. I didn't open it right away. I waited until he got home, until he was seated, until we were sipping tea like nothing in the world could unravel. Then I asked. His face told me everything before his mouth moved. First confusion, then deflection, then a flimsy story about an old student loan. "It's nothing," he said. "Just a clerical mix-up." He tried to laugh it off, but his hands trembled. That night, when he fell asleep next to me, I opened the envelope. I read every line. $36,000 in debt, 3 maxed-out credit cards, 2 personal loans with absurd interest rates, and one name that had just become a stranger to me. Julian wasn't just careless with money. He was drowning in it. And I was supposed to be his lifeline. But I'd built my own raft years ago, and I wasn't about to hand it to someone who couldn't even admit they were sinking. I lay awake all night, eyes open in the dark, staring at the ceiling like it could offer answers. But there were no answers, only strategy. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I'd seen what happened when you show your hand too early. Clara made that mistake. Her boyfriend emptied her bank account the day after she threatened to leave. I wouldn't be next. The next morning, I smiled at Julian over breakfast, asked about his day, kissed his cheek, and later I made an appointment with my lawyer, not because I was leaving, but because I was preparing. Isla Monroe wasn't going to be another cautionary tale. I'd learned my sister's lesson the hard way so I wouldn't have to live it. And I was about to turn the page to a very different kind of love story, the kind where the heroine saves herself. He thought I was his parachute, a soft landing after years of bad decisions and quiet disasters. What he didn't realize was that I had spent my entire adult life preparing for this kind of fall, not his, mine. Because you don't grow up watching your sister lose everything to a smile and a suit without learning how to spot the cracks. And when I saw the cracks in Julian, I didn't run, I calculated. I started with the basics. I sat down with my attorney, a woman named Valerie King, who spoke in clipped sentences and didn't believe in sugarcoating. I laid it out plainly: 4 rental properties in my name, a trust from my mother untouched, separate accounts, no commingled funds, no shared investment properties. "You've done everything right," Valerie said, flipping through documents with professional speed. "As long as you keep it all separate, he has no legal claim to any of it. Not unless you voluntarily gift or combine it." I nodded, a slow breath leaving me like a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. But paperwork alone wasn't enough. Julian wasn't stupid. He might not have known the specifics, but he sensed something. I could see it in the way his questions shifted. How he'd bring up joint goals or future plans, and always, it circled back to finances. "We should think about consolidating," he'd say while brushing his teeth. "Might be easier if everything's in one place." I'd smile, wrap my towel tighter, and change the subject. I didn't push, I didn't accuse, I just observed. And behind the scenes, I moved. I reviewed every document, had my real estate manager reaffirm ownership records, called banks to add additional security verifications, froze anything that might have been loosely accessible. Every lock got double-checked, every door quietly reinforced. Meanwhile, Julian continued playing the role of devoted husband. He brought home flowers on Tuesdays, cooked dinner on Fridays, kissed me on the forehead like everything was fine. But I could feel the tension building under his skin. It showed in the way he flinched at unknown calls, the way his voice tightened when he asked me what I planned to do with that extra savings account. He thought he was circling me like a prize, waiting for the moment I'd let down the last wall. What he didn't know was that the walls were steel. The morning it nearly came to a head started like any other. Eggs, toast, coffee too strong. He sat across from me, eyes darker than usual, and stirred his cup with too much focus. I waited. I knew what was coming. "We need to talk," he said, finally. I looked up, calm. "About?" "Money," he replied, careful. "Us. The future." He tried to sound mature, reasonable. He used words like partnership and trust and transparency. He painted pictures of shared dreams, of building something together, and how secrecy was poison in a marriage. And I let him speak. Every rehearsed sentence, every emotional inflection, I let him perform. Because that's all it was, a performance. When he finally paused, waiting for me to confess, to fold, to say, "Here, take it, fix everything," I simply said, "Is that everything?" His jaw flexed. "You've been hiding things from me." "Funny," I said, standing, collecting my cup. "I was about to say the same thing to you." His face changed something between panic and disbelief, but I didn't stop. "The difference," I added, "is that my secrets don't come with collections agencies." I walked out of the kitchen with the last word still echoing in the tiles, and the room turned colder than the coffee left on the table. From that moment, everything shifted. Not in a way anyone else could see. To our neighbors, our friends, we were still the newlyweds. Still smiling in public, still showing up for brunch, still posting safe staged photos online. But behind our front door, the curtain had dropped. There were no more performances, no more illusions. Julian knew I knew. I saw it in his silence and the way he stopped asking about our accounts. He retreated at first, hoping the storm would pass. But storms don't pass when the truth is finally standing in the middle of the living room. They swell. The debt collectors started calling more often. The letters became more aggressive. And for once, he stopped hiding the mail. Maybe he thought if I saw the pressure, I'd break, that I'd step in, that my love would mean a bailout. But love, real love, is built on truth, not leverage. And Julian hadn't given me truth in months. Still, I stayed. I smiled at dinner, held his hand at parties, and nodded politely when he brought up stress at work. But each night, I tightened the net. My assets stayed locked, my attorney stayed updated. I even created a separate paper trail, just in case he ever tried to fabricate a claim. It became almost clinical. I wasn't reacting emotionally anymore. I was preparing for surgery. One morning, Julian found me going over spreadsheets in the office. He leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, trying to look casual. "You know," he said, "we could make things simpler if we just pooled our finances. You don't have to handle it all alone." I looked up, smiled. I'm not. And I wasn't. I had lawyers, accountants, advisors, and most importantly, I had my gut. The very instinct he underestimated. That was always his biggest mistake. He thought I was naive. He thought I'd fall into the same trap so many women before me had fallen into. But I wasn't one of them. I was Isla Monroe. My mother taught me well, my sister taught me better. And I was about to show Julian Ross that marrying a woman like me for money was the worst investment he'd ever make, not because he wouldn't get a return, but because he'd lose everything trying. It's strange, the kind of quiet that settles when everything between two people has been said without words. After that Sunday morning conversation over coffee, where I laid the final brick between him and any hope he had of reaching what he thought was mine, the house grew cold. Not in temperature, in atmosphere. The kind of cold you feel in the silence after trust has evaporated, where every glance carries unspoken accusations and every touch feels rehearsed. Julian tried at first. For a few days, maybe even weeks, he acted like nothing had changed. He brought up dinner plans, asked if I wanted to watch movies, mentioned maybe taking a weekend trip, just us, to reconnect, he said. I nodded, smiled politely, agreed in theory. But I never followed through. I didn't need to. Because he wasn't trying to reconnect with me. He was trying to re-enter a vault he no longer had the combination for. The truth was, I'd already left the marriage in my mind. My body was still there, sleeping beside him, eating the meals he cooked, wearing the rings he gave me. But my spirit, my hope, my willingness to believe in us, it had already packed its bags and moved into the quiet clarity of survival. And once a woman moves into survival mode, love is no longer the currency. The signs of his unraveling came slowly at first. The subtle shift in his tone when he answered unknown calls, the way he flinched when he opened the mailbox, the way his phone screen dimmed automatically after 2 seconds, a new password added I wasn't told about. I didn't press. I didn't need to. Julian's secrets were already collapsing under the weight of his debt. I could feel his desperation in the way he hovered around me when I checked emails or paid bills online, pretending to make small talk while watching for screen reflections. I could hear it in his voice when he mentioned how hard the economy had been lately, how tough it was for guys like him to stay afloat. I could see it in how often he brought up the concept of financial partnership, as if he hadn't already forfeited the right to that word the day he married me with a lie in his back pocket. The more he crumbled, the more I smiled. Not out of cruelty, out of confirmation. Every nervous twitch, every guarded sentence, every failed attempt to get me to open up about what I'm holding back proved that I was right to keep quiet, that my caution wasn't paranoia, it was wisdom. But Julian wasn't just broke, he was drowning. And drowning men don't ask for help, they grab at whatever floats. even if it means dragging you down with them. I started noticing little manipulations, the passive-aggressive remarks. "It must be nice not worrying about bills," he said one evening while sorting laundry. "Not everyone has a safety net." I folded my shirt slowly, looked at him, and replied, "Not everyone wastes the one they had." He didn't respond, just stared at the dryer like it owed him an apology. Another night, he came home late, reeking of frustration and something I couldn't quite name. "Just had a terrible meeting," he said, collapsing on the couch. "Sometimes I feel like I'm carrying everything." I didn't argue. Let the silence hang between us until he filled it with more vagueness, more stress-based insinuations. "I just think," he added later, "that when two people are married, they should be open, fully, about everything." I nodded. "Including debt?" His face snapped toward me like I'd slapped him. I didn't flinch. I just stood, carried my teacup to the kitchen, and rinsed it clean. There's a certain kind of power in not needing to raise your voice. It drives manipulators mad, because they can't fight silence. They can't guilt-trip composure. They can't dismantle a strategy they can't read. And Julian, for all his schemes, never learned how to read mine. Behind the scenes, I moved with purpose. I spoke with my lawyer again, had her review any loopholes in the trust and the property deeds. I confirmed once more that nothing tied us financially. No shared bank accounts, no co-signed loans, no investments bearing both our names. Even the joint credit card he applied for when we first got married, I had refused to activate. "Just in case," I'd said back then. He laughed and told me I was being paranoid. That memory made me smile now. I also reviewed my emergency exit plans, where I'd go, what I'd do, which locks I'd change first, which passwords needed updating, because I knew it was coming. A crash, a break, a confrontation. And when it came, I wanted to be ready. It arrived, not with screaming or violence, but with a suitcase. I walked into the living room one Friday afternoon and found Julian hunched over his luggage, folding clothes with the desperation of someone finally admitting defeat. His laptop was already zipped into a bag. His cologne still sat on the dresser. He didn't hear me come in at first. When he did, he stood up slowly, hands tucked into his pockets like a boy sent to the principal's office. "So," he said, voice dry, "this is it." I said nothing. Let him speak. "I thought you had money," he continued, almost laughing but not quite. "I thought you could help." I raised an eyebrow. "I do," I said evenly. "You just never had access to it." The truth hit him harder than any insult. His shoulders sagged. His mouth opened, then closed again. For once, Julian Ross had no script, no comeback, no exit strategy, only silence. He left that night. Said he needed time to figure things out. I nodded. Didn't ask when he'd be back. Didn't ask where he was going. I didn't need to know, because by then I had already started filing the divorce paperwork. I met with Valerie the next morning. She handed me a neat folder, labeled and cross-referenced, with a checklist so meticulous it could have been military protocol. "No assets to divide," she noted. "He has no claim. The properties are safe. The trust is intact. This will be clean." "And quick?" I asked. She nodded. "As quick as it can be." I signed every page without flinching. By the end of the week, it was official. Julian Ross was no longer my problem. His debt belonged to him, his financial ruin, his name. And me? I walked away untouched. not unharmed because even the cleanest break still leaves a bruise, but untouched. The 4 houses continued to generate income. The trust fund remained where it was, and I returned to a life that no longer required surveillance, no longer required pretending, no longer required shrinking myself to accommodate someone else's disaster. Funny thing was, the hardest part wasn't the paperwork or the loneliness or the whispers from mutual friends who couldn't understand how a perfect couple unraveled so fast. The hardest part was retraining myself to feel safe in silence. Because for months, silence had been the warning, the battlefield, the prelude to a betrayal I didn't deserve. Now, silence meant peace. It meant freedom. It meant I could walk through my house and breathe without calculating my next move. The only sound left behind was the echo of a man who thought marrying me meant owning me, and the knowledge that no one, not even a charming, well-dressed husband, gets to rewrite the story I wrote for myself. I saved myself, and now I was free. It's been almost a year since Julian walked out of my house with a suitcase, a stiff jaw, and the realization that he had lost a game he never knew I was playing. I remember watching the door click shut behind him, the sound softer than I expected, like the ending of a scene that never deserved a standing ovation. There was no dramatic confrontation, no slammed doors, no broken plates. Just the quiet unraveling of a man who thought marriage was a ladder out of the hole he'd dug himself into. I didn't cry that night. Not because it didn't hurt, because it did. The kind of hurt that sits behind your ribs, low and private. The kind that doesn't show up in tears but in long stares out of kitchen windows and half-slept nights. But even in that pain, there was peace. Peace in knowing I trusted my instincts. Peace in knowing I had drawn a line early enough to still have myself on the other side. Divorce is messy, even when it's clean. There are no visible scars, but the phantom pain lingers. Some mornings I'd wake and still expect the sound of his shower, the weight of his footsteps in the hallway. Some evenings I'd catch myself reaching for a second plate. But grief, I learned, isn't just for love lost, it's for the version of yourself you had to shed to survive. I no longer had to brace for financial ambushes. I no longer lived with the quiet hum of suspicion in my ears. The house became mine again, not just legally, but emotionally. I redecorated slowly, not to erase him, but to reclaim space. New curtains, softer tones, candles in corners he never noticed. Every change was a gentle reminder. I stayed. He didn't. The money stayed mine. The houses, the trust, the life I built with my mother's voice still echoing in my mind, they remained untouched. Occasionally, I'd get updates about him through mutual connections, the way bad news travels even when you stop asking. Word was he tried to launch a startup. It failed. Took out another loan. Defaulted. Friends who once praised his charisma now described him as unlucky. I didn't gloat. I didn't laugh. I didn't even feel satisfaction. Just distance. Just confirmation. Because men like Julian don't fall because of one mistake. They fall because they believe no one will notice the pile they've been hiding their failures under. And when someone finally lifts the rug, they're not prepared for what spills out. I still visit the properties my mother left me. Each house carries a different memory, a different layer of my history. There's the one on Hawthorne Street, where she taught me how to prune roses. The duplex downtown she rented to students, always saying, invest in people, not just buildings. I walk through them sometimes, check on the tenants, fix a railing, change a bulb, sweep a porch. It's meditative, physical, real. No lies in drywall, no manipulation in fresh paint. It reminds me of how close I came to losing all of it if I had let love blind me, if I had chosen hope over caution, if I had merged bank accounts or added his name to a deed, if I had been just a little more generous with my trust. But I wasn't, and thank God for that. Some people say I should have seen it sooner, that I wasted time. But I don't see it that way. I see it as tuition, the cost of clarity. Because predators don't wear signs. They wear smiles. They remember your dog's name and bring your favorite flowers. They offer partnership when they mean possession. And, unless you've been taught how to listen for the silences between their words, you don't know your prey until the trap snaps shut. But me? I heard the silence. I read the pauses. I played quiet, not because I was weak, but because I was wise. And when it mattered, I didn't just walk away, I walked away intact. These days, I don't date much, not because I'm bitter, but because peace is addictive. I like coming home to stillness, to a kitchen where every spoon is where I left it, to a bed that only holds the weight of one honest body, to nights where no one is secretly plotting how to mind my life for their comfort. I've learned that love isn't rare, but real love, the kind that doesn't come with fine print or IOUs, that's worth waiting for. And I'll wait, or I won't, because either way, I'm whole. I've become the kind of woman I used to look up to. The kind who doesn't need rescuing, who understands the value of silence, who builds quietly and walks away before the fire starts. People still tell me I was lucky, that I dodged a bullet. I don't correct them. Let them think it was luck. Let them believe it was chance. Only I know the truth. It wasn't luck. It was legacy. My mother taught me to protect what matters. My sister showed me what happens when you don't. And I chose to learn, not repeat. The difference between a victim and a survivor is timing. I was just in time. So if he ever tells the story, if Julian ever sits across from someone new and spins a tale about the cold wife who shut him out, I hope they ask what he was hiding. I hope they ask what he owed. I hope they wonder why a woman would love so carefully. And maybe, just maybe, they'll realize the truth. I didn't shut him out. He never earned the right to come in. And now I'm free, truly, gloriously, quietly free.